The $500,000 mistake that changed everything. Picture this. You've just spent 9 years building the perfect career. Not a single sick day. Not one late arrival. Not a moment where you didn't deliver exactly what was expected. Your record is flawless, your work impeccable, and your dedication unquestionable. Then one day, you ask for a single afternoon off to watch your daughter perform in her first school play, and your boss looks you dead in the eye and says no. Not just no, but a cold, calculated rejection that makes it clear your 9 years of loyalty mean absolutely nothing. What would you do? Would you accept it and miss your daughter's moment? Or would you make a choice that could cost you everything? This is the true story of Mark Jensen, a man who faced exactly that decision, and what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about success, leadership, and what really matters in life. Eleanor Vance was the kind of executive who commanded a room the moment she entered it. Her steely blue eyes could cut through excuses faster than a laser through paper, and her perfectly tailored charcoal suits were like armor against anything resembling emotion or weakness. She sat at the head of that oak-paneled boardroom, 11 pairs of nervous eyes watching her as she studied the quarterly projections on the screen. When she spotted a dip in the South American market, her finger, adorned with a single platinum band, tapped the screen with surgical precision. The proposed solution from her team was a 10% reduction in regional marketing spend, and Eleanor dismissed it with barely concealed contempt. That wasn't a solution, she declared. That was a bandage on a gaping wound. Within minutes, she had ordered a 25% budget cut and a complete reallocation of resources to Asian markets. Her stare dared anyone to object, and predictably no one did. This was Eleanor's world, and in her world, the bottom line wasn't just a number. It was the pulse of everything that mattered. Later that evening, as city lights began twinkling outside her penthouse office, Eleanor reflected on her philosophy with quiet satisfaction. Sentimentality was a luxury she could not afford, especially not in a company founded on relentless expansion. To her, employees were assets, valuable components in a larger, intricate machine designed for optimal function. Their purpose was to contribute, not to introduce unpredictable variables like personal needs or emotional appeals. Company policies were the gears that kept everything running smoothly, and any deviation was an inefficiency she would excise without hesitation. When her assistant Sarah burst in, flustered and desperate because her son had a high fever, and she needed to leave 15 minutes before her shift ended, Eleanor's response was ice cold. The shift ended at 7, it was currently 6:45, and the quarterly report wasn't finished. Personal emergencies, Eleanor stated flatly, were not exceptions to company policy. Sarah's face crumpled with distress and defeat, but Eleanor simply watched her retreat, the soft click of the door marking the return to her solitary dominion. This was leadership, she believed. This was strength. But 9 floors below, in the fluorescent-lit expanse of the accounting department, a different kind of strength was quietly at work. Mark Jensen sat at his desk long after 7, the rhythmic clicking of his keyboard the only sound breaking the silence. 9 years he had given to Vance Corp, 9 years of meticulously balanced ledgers, flawless forecasts, and quarterly reports that sang with precision and accuracy. His work was a quiet testament to his dedication, a silent promise kept to himself and to the demanding standards of his employer. But his real motivation wasn't the numbers on the screen. It was the small laminated drawing tucked beneath his monitor, a stick figure with wild red hair holding the hand of a taller, more stoic figure. "Me and Daddy," his daughter Lily had declared with a gap-toothed grin when she presented it to him. Being a single father wasn't just Mark's role. It was the core of who he was, the unwavering anchor in his life. Every late night, every perfectly balanced sheet, every sacrifice was for her, a brick laid in the foundation of their small, secure world. Mark's attendance record was something he took quiet pride in, not as a boast but as confirmation of his unwavering reliability. Not a single sick day, not a late arrival, not an absence in 9 years. He was the man who showed up, who delivered, who never faltered. So when he finally typed out a request for a single day off, his heart hammered against his ribs in a rhythm that felt strangely out of sync with the quiet office around him. The reason was simple and profound. He wanted to attend his daughter Lily's inaugural school play, The Whispering Woods, where she would perform as a singing tree. He'd even included a detailed schedule showing how he'd front-loaded his work to ensure absolutely no disruption to his tasks. When he placed the form on Eleanor Vance's assistant's desk, his voice was barely more than a murmur, a little hoarse with nervousness. It was for the 23rd, he said, hoping beyond hope that 9 years of perfect service would count for something. It didn't. When Eleanor reviewed Mark's request later that afternoon, her response was swift and unyielding. She picked up the form with an almost clinical touch, her eyes scanning his neat handwriting with the same cold efficiency she applied to every business decision. A day off for a children's play struck her as frivolous, an unacceptable disruption to corporate responsibilities. Company policy was clear in her mind. Unscheduled leave was disruptive. Performance reviews and attendance records were paramount. Personal events could not supersede corporate responsibilities. Her lips thinned into a resolute line as she summoned him to her office through her assistant. When Mark arrived, his stomach tight with dread, the assistant pushed the crumpled form back across the desk toward him with a flat, emotionless voice. It had been denied. Eleanor's exact words, she reported, were that any absence on the 23rd would be considered unexcused and would result in disciplinary action. The air seemed to grow heavy, pressing down on Mark as his meticulously planned day, his daughter's shining moment, dissolved into Eleanor's cold, dismissive words. That night, as Mark stared at the vibrant crayon drawing Lily had made, a lopsided sun and a stick figure clutching an oversized balloon, Eleanor's curt email replayed in his mind like a percussive blow. Operational necessity. Your presence is required. This wasn't mere inconvenience. It felt like a direct assault on the promise he'd made to his daughter, on everything he'd worked so hard to build after his wife Sarah's death. He closed his eyes, picturing Eleanor's unyielding gaze, the way she dismissed his 9 years of perfect attendance as utterly insignificant. One day, he murmured, the words tasting like ash. One single day for his daughter. When he opened his eyes, the drawing still radiated innocent joy, starkly at odds with his internal turmoil. This wasn't merely about a day off anymore. It was about Lily, her face beaming with anticipation as she described her part, her happiness so pure and unburdened that it served as his life's unwavering anchor. Everything else suddenly felt secondary, brittle, and inconsequential. No, he whispered, the decision crystallizing within him. He wouldn't let her down, not for a job, not for anything. Later that evening, after her bath, Lily skipped into the living room with damp curls framing her face, asking the question that would change everything. "Daddy, are you coming to Parent Palooza?" Her voice was a hopeful melody, her eyes wide with anticipation. Mark knelt, pulling her into a tight embrace, inhaling the sweet scent of strawberry shampoo. "Yes, sweet pea," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Her face ignited, brilliant as a miniature sun, and she squeezed him back with a small but powerful hug. Mark watched her perform a joyful little dance, and a quiet strength settled deep in his chest. The path ahead might be rocky, the consequences severe, but witnessing her unadulterated joy, he knew he'd made the only choice that truly mattered. He would be there for his daughter, and whatever happened next, he would face it standing firm. The next morning, the crisp ring of Eleanor's intercom shattered the silence of her meticulously organized office. "Miss Vance," her assistant's voice stated without inflection, "Mark Jensen is not at his desk this morning." Eleanor's jaw tightened as she leaned forward, pressing the talk button with a decisive click. "Confirmed absent?" "Yes, Miss Vance. He hasn't responded to calls or emails." A cold satisfaction bloomed in Eleanor's chest, a twisted sense of professional vindication. "Very well," she commanded. "Draft a termination letter for Mark Jensen, effective immediately. State gross insubordination and neglect of duties as the primary reasons." Her voice was steady, unwavering, a testament to what she believed was her resolve and strength. This wasn't about vindictiveness, she told herself. It was about upholding the standards she had painstakingly built. A company couldn't function if employees believed they could disregard policy without consequence. Her father had instilled that discipline in her, and she was merely following his example, ensuring the machinery of their enterprise ran smoothly without sentimental clogs getting in the way. Miles away, in a beautifully ornate theater, vibrant notes soared through the air as Mark and Lily sat captivated by the magic unfolding before them. Lily's small hand nestled in his, her eyes wide with wonder as performers twirled across the stage. A genuine smile softened Mark's face, a rare sight in recent weeks as the weight of uncertainty had pressed down on him. He squeezed Lily's hand gently, her infectious joy washing away the knowing dread of yesterday's decision. For this brief, precious moment, the world outside the velvet seats and gilded arch seemed to fade completely. He was simply a father sharing a moment of pure delight with his daughter, utterly unaware that the delicate balance of his life had already begun to crumble, dictated by a cold voice and a decisive click hundreds of miles away. But sometimes, the universe has a way of revealing that the things we think will destroy us are actually the doors to something far better than we ever imagined. Weeks later, the ballroom of the Grand Hyatt shimmered with hushed conversations and the clinking of crystal glasses. Eleanor, resplendent in an emerald gown that caught the ambient light with every subtle movement, navigated the throng of city council members, venture capitalists, and philanthropic elite with practiced ease. Her carefully cultivated smile never wavered as she exchanged strategic pleasantries, each interaction a quiet affirmation of her place in this world. But tonight, she was searching for one person above all others. Her father, Richard Vance, chairman of the Vance Group, was the gravitational center of this opulent universe, and earning his approval still mattered to Eleanor more than she cared to admit. She finally spotted him in a secluded alcove, bathed in the soft glow of a single candle, and what she saw made her blood run cold. He was relaxed, genuinely smiling, leaning in to listen intently to someone across the table. When that person turned slightly, Eleanor's breath hitched. The broad shoulders, the familiar cut of the dark suit, the way his dark hair caught the light. It was Mark Jensen. The same Mark Jensen she had fired for taking a single day off. The very man who should be at home looking for new employment was here, laughing easily, and her father's hand rested briefly, almost affectionately, on Mark's arm. Confusion battled with rising disbelief, and then a cold, hard anger began to curdle in Eleanor's gut. What in God's name was he doing here? And why was her father looking at him like that? The clinking of silverware faded into a dull roar in Eleanor's ears as she strode toward the table, fury tightening like a knot in her stomach. "Mark," she said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise like a shard of glass. He flinched, his smile dissolving as he turned to face her. "I think you owe me an explanation." Her gaze was sharp and unwavering, daring him to deny it. Richard, until now oblivious to the storm brewing at his elbow, set down his champagne flute, his brow furrowing slightly as he took in Eleanor's rigid posture and Mark's sudden discomfort. "Eleanor, darling, what's wrong?" Richard asked, genuine concern in his voice. He turned to Mark with a warm smile. "Mark, you haven't properly met my daughter, Eleanor, though I imagine you two have crossed paths." The casualness of his tone, the way he looked at Mark as if he were a valued friend rather than a recently dismissed employee, made Eleanor's blood run cold. "Cross paths," she echoed, her voice laced with incredulity. "Father, what is he doing here?" "I fired him yesterday." Richard's smile remained, though a hint of amusement now played around his lips as he placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. "Fired? Oh, Eleanor, you do have a flair for the dramatic. Mark isn't simply here. He's been an invaluable advisor to me for months now." Eleanor stared, dumbfounded, as the sophisticated hum of the room and the soft glow of chandeliers seemed to blur around her. "An advisor," she managed, the word a strained whisper. Richard nodded, his gaze softening, as he looked at Mark with genuine respect and admiration. "Indeed," Richard continued, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Quietly, diligently, Mark has been working with me on the Vance Legacy Philanthropic Project. A brilliant mind dedicated to making a real difference. He's been handling the entire operational framework. I specifically asked him to keep it under wraps to avoid unnecessary fanfare until we were ready for the official announcement. His integrity, his commitment, it's truly commendable." He turned to Eleanor, his earlier amusement gone, replaced by profound disappointment. "You see, Eleanor, while you were busy upholding company policy, Mark was busy changing the world." The words hit Eleanor like a physical blow, each syllable landing with devastating precision. Richard's hand remained on Mark's shoulder as he recounted how they'd had a lovely chat a few weeks back, how Mark had mentioned his predicament about his daughter Lily's crucial school play, a part she worked incredibly hard for. Eleanor felt the cold knot in her stomach tighten as the memory of Mark's earnest, almost desperate plea flashed through her mind, along with her own clipped corporate dismissal. "He told me how important it was to him to be there for her," Richard continued, his gaze unwavering on Eleanor, "and how he'd unfortunately run into a rather rigid interpretation of company policy regarding personal leave." The air in the opulent ballroom suddenly felt too thin, too heavy. Eleanor's cheeks flushed crimson, the intricate patterns on the antique rug seeming to swirl mockingly beneath her feet. "It struck me," Richard said thoughtfully, "that a man who dedicates himself so completely to his child, to something so fundamental as family, possesses a rare kind of integrity. A man who understands true value beyond the bottom line." He paused, allowing the words to hang in the air like a silent indictment. Vance Corp unfortunately wasn't equipped to appreciate that particular strength in Mark, but I personally found it invaluable. He turned to Mark with a benevolent smile. "So I offered Mark an advisory role, consulting on my personal investment portfolio. A flexible arrangement where Lily's school plays or any other significant family event will always take precedence. His insights are remarkably sharp, and the results have been, shall we say, more than satisfactory." Mark offered Eleanor a small, almost apologetic smile, a gesture that only deepened her mortification. The man she had so casually dismissed, deemed expendable for a single day, was now not only gainfully employed by her own father, but was being lauded for the very values she had so carelessly trampled. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She hadn't just fired an employee. She had overlooked a man of profound character, a resource her father clearly valued above all else. The champagne tasted like ash in her mouth as the full weight of her mistake settled over her. Richard's words continued to echo in her mind. "You always had such a sharp mind for business, Eleanor, but sometimes I worry you let the numbers obscure the people." That young man understood the value of time, the kind of time that truly matters. A company policy, no matter how well intended, should never eclipse a father's desire to be present for his child. Later that evening, finding Mark alone for a moment by the dessert table, Eleanor approached with her heart a tangled knot of regret and wounded pride. "Mark," she began, her voice unusually hesitant. "I wanted to apologize about the day off. I realize now," she trailed off, searching for the right words as corporate jargon suddenly felt hollow and meaningless. Mark turned, holding a small tart, a serene expression on his face that was devoid of bitterness. "Eleanor," he said calmly, "it's all right. I understand you had to uphold company policy." And truthfully, he offered a small, knowing smile. It was the best thing that could have happened. He gestured vaguely at the opulent ballroom, a silent testament to his new, comfortable reality. "My daughter had a wonderful time at her play, and I found a path that allows me to be both a committed father and a valued professional." His acceptance was gracious yet firm, a clear boundary drawn. He had moved on, found something better, and Eleanor's cold decision had paradoxically become his greatest opportunity. Eleanor felt a cold wave wash over her as the full implications became clear. His forgiveness wasn't an invitation to return or reconcile. It was simply an acknowledgement of a closed chapter, a door that had shut permanently behind him. The realization hit her with unexpected force. She mumbled a goodbye, and excusing herself from the lingering guests, walked out into the cool night air. The city lights blurred as she hailed a cab, her father's words and Mark's quiet strength swirling within her consciousness. Had she truly been so blind, so consumed by the bottom line and rigid policies, that she'd forgotten the human element entirely?